Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Virtual Baltimore's panel on outlining versus pantsing. This panel will be recorded. If you have any questions, you can please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. There's also a chat thing. We will not be answering questions for that. Feel free to chat if you would like, but please keep it PG because we have an open audience here. I am A.L. Kaplan, you call me Amy, and we're gonna first do our introductions. I'm gonna start with J.L.
Hi, I'm J.L. Gribble. I write an urban fantasy alternate history series, Steel Empires. The first book is Steel Victory, and a revised edition is coming out later this summer, but there are 5 books in the series so far.
And Charlie.
Hi, my name is Charlie Brown. I'm a writer and filmmaker and editor and college professor. I write urban fantasy under the name C.D. Brown. I write literary fiction under the name Charles V. Brown, and I make movies under the name Charlie Brown. So I've split my audience quite well.
And next up is Vivian.
Hi, I have written the Dr. Greta Helsing trilogy, Strange Practice, Dreadful Company, and Grave Importance. My short fiction has appeared in Uncanny and Pseudopod. I'm also a freelance editor, and I have some slots available for June and July. So if you want your manuscript looked at, hit me up at vseditorial.com.
Okay, thank you. Ryan, your turn.
Hey, yeah, my name's Ryan Van Loon. I'm a fantasy writer. My debut, called The Sin and the Steel, comes out from Tor Books, July 21st. Prior to being a writer, I was in the military and the infantry as an NCO for 6 years. Did a tour in Afghanistan. The day job now is actually in healthcare innovation, which are completely separate. And I'm really excited to talk outlining and pantsing.
Well, congratulations and thank you. And I write under the name A.L. Kaplan. I write science fiction and fantasy. My debut novel was Star Touched. I have several short stories out in assorted anthologies and a new short story coming out shortly. I'm also the vice president of the Maryland Writers Association. So our topic is outlining versus pantsing. The first thing I think we need to do is answer, what is that? Because I know some people are thinking pantsing and imagining people running around with no pants or pulling people's pants down, and that's not what it is. JL, why don't you give us your take on what let's start with pantsing.
So pantsing is just kind of the abbreviated term for writing by the seat of your pants, just sitting down and start typing or longhand and just seeing where the story goes. And I did that for one novel and I will never do it again.
Charlie, what about you? You have anything to add?
Yes, I do. I tend to plan out my stories a little bit. So when I think of pantsing, I kind of picture myself on one of these things, and that it's just a weird little ride, right? You know, that you get a quick cheap thrill out of making up something in the midterm, but that you still kind of have to go back and fix a lot. I have done it. I found I do it now with screenplays. That a screenplay I won't outline as much because it's only 90 to 120 pages. But a novel, if I don't know where I'm going, then I find that I'm not actually enjoying the writing part of it.
Okay, Vivian.
Yeah, I go all the way to the outline edge of this. In fact, I do a thing that a lot of screenwriters seem to do, which is keeping track of each individual scene on the side of my screen so that I can immediately see where they are in my chapters and I can jump to that individual scene And I also do a thing with an Excel spreadsheet where I can track where each character is and what they're doing over the course of the novel. I learned this by doing it very badly once, and now I do it less badly.
Ryan, do you think you could give us a definition of what an outliner is?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the strict definition would be it's someone that is writing their novel using an outline that they've created that shows them the entire structure, character arcs, story development, has a beginning, middle, end. And I think there's flavors of that. I started off, my first novel was written almost completely discovery because, you know, I read On Writing by Stephen King, and he's a discovery writer, so I thought that's what everybody did. And I've kind of advanced since then. Each novel I've gotten, I think, more and more refined with my process, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But I'm definitely not quite to the level of Vivian, with each scene having, you know, an outline into itself. That's awesome and intense, but definitely really structured in the way I approach a novel and constructing an outline versus, you know, making it up as you go. Okay,
so I did a little bit of research online, trying to get some definitions. Not exactly. A plotter's, just as JL said, they sit down, they may have a little bit of an idea of what they want and even may know a few of the characters in history, but they just sit down and just start writing from beginning to end, and then worry about going back and fixing things.
Or even totally achronologically. They write the scenes that they want to write, and yeah, neither outlining nor pantsing necessarily have to be written in order.
I know some of you have already started to answer this a little bit, but are you a pantser or an outliner? I think JL, you started with a little bit of this. You want to pick that one up?
So my debut novel I wrote as part of my graduate school thesis at Seton Hill University, and I kind of outlined out like a few scenes at a time, and you know, it's a decent book, and I passed the program, but when it came time to actually submit and sell, I ended up like cutting out 15,000 words because it meandered, because I didn't always know where I was going. And then by the time I sold my series, I was writing under more of a hardcore schedule. I was writing a book a year, and so I didn't have time to have that discovery process. I had to outline everything out. And I've used, in the 5 books I've written since, I've used 4 different outlining methods, depending on the focus of the novel. And some worked better for me than others, but all of them have been interesting. And I will probably never go back to discovery writing except for short fiction, which I don't do very much of, so.
So Charlie, why don't you, how about you? What do you do?
Yeah, I can't outline as hardcore as Vivian or Ryan's talking about. I have to, but I do know this, that because of who I am, I found that a lot of what we call pantsers, to them, and I don't mean this as an insult, so just so you know, to them that writing is plotting, that they enjoy, to them writing things down is about plotting, the discovery of what's going to happen next. And that's not who I am. I need to know what happens next so that I can indulge in my words. I like to put the words first to get the voice and to have clever wordplay and all that sort of stuff. And I find that if I don't know where I am, that kind of stuff doesn't happen. And so I just need to know, at least in every scene, that I have a beginning, middle, end, so that I can find the most clever way to do that, always knowing what's going forward. And yeah, if you have to, a lot of people, if you don't outline, you don't foreshadow. So you have to, that I think that pantsing is a lot more work because you have to go back through it again and again and again. And that's from someone who outlined a novel and still went through 8 drafts of it. So.
Okay, Vivian, you have anything else to add about what you do?
Yeah, my story is kind of weird because my first novel I originally wrote as a nano back in 2004. And it then sat in a trunk for 10 years, and then I started rewriting it. And then it actually got picked up, and I went through professional editing, and it changed so much. Then book 2, I was having a really great time starting book 2, and I got about 20,000 words in, and then I realized I was on schedule to finish it in about 30,000 words, and I was contracted for 90. So I had to go back and chop up holes in the original book and stick another book in the middle and then spackle over it. This led me to understand that I do not work very well like that. In order to avoid hideous continuity errors, I have to make sure that I know where people are, what they're doing, and what that means for the other characters. So I kind of came up with this system that works for me and may work for other people, but it's a lot of extra planning and working.
Okay, Ryan, your turn.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some regards, at some point in the process, we're all pantsers, right? Because even when you're creating an outline, you're discovering what the story is and what the structure looks like. So sometimes I think it's a bit of a false dichotomy. It's just, where do you want to do that discovery work? I prefer to do it up front. So my outlines are pretty intense. I use 7-point structure, which is, I think comes from film writing and screenwriting, but I use that. I use the Hollywood formula for my character arcs. I put all that together. And what that helps me do really is write with intention. So when I'm in a scene, I'm not wondering where it's going or not sure what beats I'm trying to hit or what I want the reader to feel. I know, and that lets me just really drill into the scenes, and that gets me excited. I know some people get more excited if they don't know going in and they like that sense of suspense, but I just like to be efficient. I have so many stories I want to tell. And yeah, if I had to rewrite the story 3 or 4 times just to know what story I wanted to tell, that would drive me crazy. So I do what works for me, but I know a lot of people that, discover write in multiple drafts.
I just want to add
one of the secrets.
Yeah.
Charlie?
I just wanted to add that one of the things, because I started writing screenplays before I started writing novels, and I was outlining, and I had this, what I found is when I transitioned to more prose writing, that I was writing a lot of novellas. So if you do plot like it's a movie, don't use movie plots. Use 3 movie plots, and then you'll be able to get yourself a novel.
Okay, and I fall somewhere in between plotting and outlining, which is sometimes called plotting, or outlining and pantsing, sometimes called plotting. So I consider myself a plantser, sort of in the middle. For my novel, for Star Touch, I had the beginning scene, I had the ending scene, and I had a few scenes in the middle, and the rest of it I just sort of discovered as I went through. And I've had, my experience has shown, even if I write a plot, half the time it goes out the door when I start writing, because I find better ways of doing it, and things just sort of take off from there. But I can't totally pants it, because once I've started, I always have to sit down, work out the timeline and more details on the characters. And I keep that notebook with me of all those kinds of details.
Well, I think that the most important thing that all writers need to remember is that even if, no matter how detailed your outline is, you're not married to it. You can, if something happens and a scene goes in a totally different direction, change that outline, Don't worry about it. No one else knows that that's there except you. No one's going to be like, you didn't stick to the recipe. Your book is wrong.
Well, somebody will, but you can't listen to them.
No one's going to see my old character sketches that went completely sideways. Character is nothing like anything that ended up from the beginning.
I think that's kind of why I switched over from writing in Word to writing in Scrivener, is that you can jump right there with that outline, you know, and that they have that scene construction, and that you can so easily move around scenes, you know, to make the final product. I do end in Word, you know, because you have to, but you know, it's all built into the program to have here's the outline, here's the character sketch, here's all that, and you know, and it's a fairly cheap program.
You know, I tried Scrivener for one book, and I ended up going back to Word. And
oh, really?
Yeah, like, I mean, obviously there's no one right way to do anything, but I tried it and it didn't work for me. So, you know, I love that people love Scrivener, and I love that people promote it. But if it doesn't work for you, don't feel bad.
Yeah.
I went back to my sticky notes on poster board, which turns into index cards, which turns into just a straight up bullet point list in Word as my outline.
Yeah, I try to read my handwriting as little as possible.
I'm glad I'm not the only one on that. Yeah, and just so you know, I live by sticky notes. They're all over. That's how I take my notes. When I think of things, I write it down, and then it's around the room.
I think Scrivener is like sort of the professional version of what I do. I think I sort of reinvented a form of like process that is like Scrivener. I used to do
I feel like they did the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I keep the thing running on the side of the screen so I can jump to the scenes, and I can move them around if I need to. And I also do the thing with square brackets. I don't know if anyone else in the world does this, but as you're writing, you come to the next scene that you have to write. And in square brackets, I write, character does this. They have to get this done, then these people do that. And then as I write that, I go back and erase the square brackets. It's like each little tiny piece gets its own mini outline, which then can change, but that's how I've managed to keep going even when I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing.
Oh, I have my first draft is littered with notes of research this later, or come up with this bit character's name later, or, you know, just anything
like
that
might
anything that might make me stop writing, I just save until later.
Yep.
Yeah, there are a lot of reason people use the TK is that doesn't occur very often naturally in English, so you can always just search for TK, and you know, I always thought it meant to come. I don't know if that's true or not, because I came out of journalism, but yeah, using that, you know, if you don't know what it is, you do Dr. TK, and then you just search TK, and then it'll, you know, then you know you're not going to come across other words. You're not going to have 500 unless you leave 500 TKs in your manuscript.
Yeah, I think my last one of my works in progress, for the first month and a half, I had a character that was called Bad Guy Number 1, Super Bad Guy Number 2. It's like all through it before I found them names. So it sounds like everyone has already been doing a combination. What other techniques can you recommend for someone who's maybe only done pantsing that would help them do a little bit of the outlining, or someone who's only done outlining that would help them do a little bit more of the pantsing? Let's start with JL.
Oh man, I think what I said earlier is, you know, if you're used to writing by the seat of your pants and you decide to switch to outline, like I said, don't stress out if the story doesn't go in the direction of your outline. And that being said, if you're writing to your outline that you've created before you start writing, and you decide that it's just not working, or your characters want to do something else, that's fine.
Okay, good. Charlie?
So when I start talking to pantsers and discovery writers about you know, maybe writing down an outline, I see them get this look in their eyes. And
It's writing death. Your high school English teacher, right?
What's that?
Yep.
People hear outline and they hear their high school English teacher.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, they hear my voice because I am a college professor. Now, to use the college professor analogy here, I do a lot of brainstorming, in that I will write down a bunch of scenes that I think might be cool, and that helps me when my outline is dead and my improvisational skills have fallen away. I will do the old-fashioned brainstorming and just write down as many things as possible, and then throw away try to separate the wheat from the chaff. That's when I will go to the notebook and I will actually handwrite it down. And that's, that I find, because I can do that. I like, I'm a walking cliche. I love to do that in a coffee shop somewhere, with the jazz in the background, and, putting down a cappuccino and writing my brilliant thoughts in my Moleskine. The mustache must give away that I'm a hipster, right?
So you're one of those English teachers that are fun.
Yes, I hope I'm fun.
I think I almost stopped. I almost stopped writing because of those outlines that I had to do in high school.
Oh, I never asked for outlines on the college level. However they get there, they get there. I've gotten over that. High school English teachers and college English professors are kind of at loggerheads right now. We don't really like each other.
How about you, Vivian?
Well, if I was trying to give advice to someone who does not outline, I think I would start with asking them where they want their characters to get to, and then figure out if they can back engineer that and figure out how they get from where they are to where they want to be. And if they can cut that into little bits so that they can write those individual pieces of the scene. But for me, in order to avoid hideous continuity errors, I have to do the sort of Excel spreadsheet thing with the characters and the days along the top. These people have been in London for these days, and then they flew to New York, which means that I need to make sure that the timeline continues to be consistent, as opposed to trying to jump around in time and space, which always gets me mixed up.
I have to do that because I write vampires, and I have to make sure that they're not outside during daylight sometimes.
Yeah, I do the vampire thing too, and yeah, that's my thing that I always try to remember, that I always forget, that I have them breathing. It's wait a minute, they don't breathe. That's one thing I always have to go back and search to make sure that I don't say they let out a breath or something like that. Yep. Or if they do, they said it's what they remembered from being a human, but they didn't actually have to breathe.
Everybody's vampires are different.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they're not supposed to sparkle.
No, mine do, but only because they wear body glitter.
Ah,
there
you go.
In book 2, there is a coven of absolutely dreadful, edgelord goth vampires in Paris, and they wear body glitter unironically. And I was just I love the fact that I got to do that. Yeah,
my Los Angeles is filled with all these little vampire cabals, and one of them is the Glamazons. Yeah.
How about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I think a good way to start, if you're not sure if outlining is for you, is to take a story that you've already written and deconstruct it in outline form. So a simple one is 3-act structure, 7-point structure I mentioned before. That's what I use. There's a couple different ways you can break it down, but I think if you break it down that way and really analyze it, it'll help you start to see patterns. And is your act 2 too long? Are you taking too long in act 1? And I think that'll help you the next time you sit down to write to maybe think about doing it. And then I think Vivian's suggestion is a good one. Brandon Sanderson is somebody who gave me a lot of instruction early on, and he always says you have to know the ending before you can write the beginning, which is the hardest thing in the world for me to do. And honestly, I take weeks just thinking about my outline before I even start to outline it. But then when I'm writing, I'm able to write 12 to 18,000 words a week. And so I can pump something out pretty quickly. Whereas when I was discovery writing, it was going much slower because I had to think about, each sentence as I was going, because I didn't know what the next sentence was pointed to. So I think those are a couple of ways to get your feet wet with outlining and kind of see if it works out for you. And I would say, if you absolutely hate it, if it's not working for you, then abandon it. I tried, Jim Butcher has a pretty good blog post on, A/B writing and some other things. And he has a very, very structured format that he uses. And I tried that for about half a novel, and it felt like I was like walking through quicksand. So, you'll figure out, if you give it a really good try pretty early on, if it's right for you or not.
So, yeah, I guess this would be a good time to point out that I have, despite the fact that I don't do as much outlining, the one thing I do outline is my timeline. And I have one of those big giant wall hangers sitting right behind me that you cannot see, that has the entire timeline, multiple years included, for Star Touch, because I'm working on the sequel right now, and time has elapsed. And I need to keep in mind when all the different dates of special events, the Day of Reckoning, these other little new celebrations and things, I need to keep track of when they are and where people are. We do have, someone had asked, how detailed do you make your outlines? I'm going to open this one up. Who would like to answer that one?
Mine is just the characters in the scene and what the conflict point within the scene is. That's, the bare minimum that I do. And then some scenes, especially scenes that have combat, I will even outline within the scene, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and this happens. And then I'll go in and fill in all the narrative and the dialogue to make sure that I don't miss anything.
No, I'm pretty bare minimum. I give the character names and what's happening in the scene. I don't write because because of the way I'm writing. I don't really make chapters until the end of the book. I just write a collection of scenes and then decide what the chapters are. So I basically an outline is 1 or 2 sentences and what happens in a scene, and that can be from 500 words to 2,500 words, depending on how thick it is, how rich that particular scene is.
Vivian?
Yeah, mine's pretty long. Like I said before, I use that 7-point structure. You start at the end, then you go to the beginning, then you go to these different pinch points along the way and turning points in the midpoint, things like that. And so I'll do that first, and that'll be a few pages. And then I'll go back through and figure out, okay, so how do we get to each of these different points? And at the end, it's about a 30-page bulleted outline in Word. And then I'll write a summary that is really detailed. That's about 30 pages, single space, that is actually me getting closer to prose into the story. And then I'll analyze it. I'll break it down like I was saying before and actually analyze it. Does the structure work? Am I lingering too long in one place, not in another? And then once I'm pretty confident with that, I'll share that with my agent and my editor, get their feedback. Then I'll do one final revision. And now at this point, it's maybe like closer to 40 pages. And then I'll sit down and write the actual prose. So I feel like my prose is actually my second or third draft by the time I'm actually writing it. But that's what I do.
Yeah, I'm looking at probably doing something like that for the first time, just because it's the last book in the series, and I want it to be as tight as possible to live up to being the last book in the series. But I'm still really intimidated by it. So no matter how much you write, there's always going to be something new.
For me, there's like 2 kinds of outlining. There's the overarching arc, like what happens in the book. Like these characters do this thing, then eventually they get to this denouement. But the actual work of outlining that I really do is the scene by scene square bracket bit. And I do that as I go along. So I don't necessarily know exactly what's going to happen in each chapter. I make up what's going to happen in the next scenes, then I write those, and then based on that, I continue on from there. But like, it can change. It can absolutely change. And like, the thing you have to remember is be flexible and don't blame yourself if you don't get to do the thing that you thought you were going to do.
Ryan, I could never do what you do. I have no patience. That might be the military man in you, to be that disciplined. I am about as unmilitary as you can get. So I would run out of, I could do that for like 3 chapters, and then I would be like, bored, let me write. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I'm writing actual chapters out. Like, I don't get down to that level. It really more is, acts along the way. It's more than 3, but it's acts along the way. And I mean, for me, it's like I've heard before, the first draft is the story you tell yourself. The second draft is the story you tell the reader. For me, all of this is me telling myself the story. So it doesn't feel like dead to me or boring, because I know I talk to a lot of people that are discovery writers, and that's their big fear, that like this is going to kill the story for them. But it's like really me getting excited about, oh, here's this moment of awesome that I never knew about, and now I can't wait to write to get to that point of that moment of awesome. That's actually something I've been doing the last few books. Is I think every writer has a different sticking point in the story. For some folks, it's like 30,000 words in. For me, it's like 80,000 words in, right around the time where I'm transitioning between Act 2 and 3, where I just get really bogged down and have trouble like pushing forward. And so what I started doing is figuring out what are some like amazing moments of awesome that I can just throw in right at that point, so that when I get there, I'm so excited to write it that I totally blow past that sticking point. And not to be superstitious, but knock on wood, that's been working well for me.
Yeah, I do take some notes, sort of like how Vivian does in my, I'll skip over sections, like I'll fill in this scene here and then I'll go on to whatever's next in my mind. But you do have to watch out for pantsing yourself into a corner that you can't get out of, which is a downside of just sitting down and writing, because I've done that a few times, including a short story that I've been working on for far longer than I should have been, because I did not sit down and plan out where the story was going. So I've changed the end about 6 times, and I think I finally got it this time. Before we go to questions, I just want to do once around with, do you think one method is better than the other? Starting with JL.
No, one method is better than the other for you individually as a writer. That is, every writer is different. I refuse to be one of those writers who's like, this works for me, so obviously this will work for you too. It may, give it a shot, but if it doesn't, I don't care.
We don't ever see, no, you should never see politics and sausage making. You should never see the insides of a writer's factory. Just let it be.
Vivian?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think either of them are like categorically superior, but it definitely has to do with what works for you and what tools you can use to make it easier on yourself to tell the story. That's all it really is a toolkit.
And Ryan, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, at the end of the day, all that matters is what the reader gets out of it when they're reading it. One of my favorite authors is Stephen King. He's a discovery writer. I really love J.K. Rowling growing up. She is definitely an outliner. Brandon Sanderson's books are another that I love, and he outlines to a degree that, I couldn't do. So I think there's a spectrum, and at the end of the day, the readers just care about what's on the page.
Hold on, I think I've got a visual representation of how many characters there are in a Brandon Sanderson novel, something like that.
Is that why they're like 2 inches thick? Or 3 inches thick?
Yeah. That is actual Mardi Gras. If you don't know that is actual Mardi. And I'm in there. That's me in the blue suit there, in the blue wig.
Oh, cool. I saw it for a half. There you go. Okay, so we have someone asked a question. I'm going to hit the questions now. Have those of you who have been writing long-term changed your process over the years?
Definitely. And it has to do with just the goal of publishing a book a year, which my publisher had nothing to do with. I just decided that's what I wanted to do. And so I take, my goal is always to have a fairly complete draft to my publisher before the previous book is actually released. So every year I'm writing a book, and I'm also editing a book, and I'm also promoting a book. And so I you know, the whole concept of only working on one book at a time is very foreign to me. And I'm almost kind of freaked out to be reaching the end of my series, because then I will only have one thing to work on, and I'm like, oh. But yeah, it's definitely changed and evolved, especially since I started being published.
Yeah, for me, if one of the funny things is that I'd use 3 different software programs to write. So I write on Word for short stories and finishing up novels, Scrivener for novels, and Final Draft for screenplays. And boy, one of the great things about Final Draft is that it does all this formatting for you. And so for me, it's like slipping into this warm bath. It's like I know when I hit the 30-page mark, all right, you better be in the first act. You know, it's just like, that's why I can pants a screenplay a little bit better, because that's, you know, I write linearly. I cannot write non-linearly. So that's a whole other conversation. But since I'm writing everything linearly, the screenplay just starts to naturally evolve. So when I'm, you know, that program, when I can do 10 to 15 pages a day, I just know that it's setting everything else up for me. But yeah, with longer prose, I just find the more I plan ahead, the better it's going to be.
Vivian?
My process has changed in that I've come up with these very specific tools that I use to make this easier for myself. When I first started writing like nano novels, that was much more sort of a pantsing process. But now that I've had to streamline and make my writing the most efficient it possibly can be, I've developed these tools over the past 3 books. Possibly because book 2 is such an enormous, horrible experience to write. I had to come up with ways to make that not happen again in book 3. And I think I've pretty much solidified the process now.
Both of my nano novels were completely plotted out, so that's really funny.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did 2 of them. One in 2004, one in 2006. And they actually all sort of ended up being part of the trilogy in a way, but the evolution from the original version in nano to what it is now is like kind of unrecognizable.
My the second book of my series and the third book of my series were both nano novels. I did it once to prove that I could, and again the next year to prove that it wasn't a fluke, and I'm never doing it again.
Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're always learning and evolving as you go. Writing simultaneously gets easier and much harder, I think, the more you do it. So I'm always looking for ways to improve my process. But I definitely started off as a pure discovery writer on book 1. Then book 2 realized if I would, think about the next scene that was coming up the day before I would write it, I would write that much better and I would have more intention and it just read a lot better. And then I just kept going from there. And I think I've pretty much locked into a space, but I'm still looking for like, where can I improve around the edges? Or, like Vivian said, when you're editing and publishing books and you start to realize that you had a bad experience or a rough patch, you really want to figure out what to do next time, because the more books you get out there, the less time you have in between. So, you just look for ways to improve efficiency, I think.
Okay. And I know mine's changed all over the place. I think I started outlining, then went to pantsing, and now I'm a plantser. Next question. Do you think that your academic background is an important consideration to either outline or pantsed?
So for my day job, I'm a technical editor. And so just having to always be working within a structure for medical text, I think definitely affects the fact that I also want structure for when I'm writing fiction.
I'm one of those guys because I teach now, and I did, also got the MFA, but also starting in journalism, that was one of the first great things that happened to me, because it does make it makes you tell the story in the least amount of words. But also, yeah, now that I'm teaching essay writing, I'm not teaching creative writing, I'm just teaching essay writing. I find myself asking my students to do a lot more of the creative writing stuff and less of the academic writing stuff, because I read academic articles and they're terrible. They're convoluted, and and they don't say what they think you say, and it's like, and I'm like, at this point, after in the world we live in, I just want everybody to be as clear and concise as possible, without spin. And so, maybe I'm teaching my students wrong.
I call that job security.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How about you, Vivian?
Well, I did do an MFA, but largely I did that to get the M after my name so that I would be more hireable to potential employers. It was an interesting experience, but I don't think it had much effect on my writing process, like vis-a-vis outlining and pantsing. I just learned a lot of different kinds of writing in that.
Ryan, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I got my start in my non-military career in health research, so I'm out on PubMed with a couple of credits there if folks are super interested in some epidemiology. I don't think it really helped with my creative writing necessarily. I think probably my creative writing helped there actually in communicating a little bit more effectively than sometimes some of my colleagues who came up through more the academic side, maybe had a little bit more trouble with that, but yeah.
I've heard horror stories about dissertations, people telling you that this is way too understandable. This is far too clear. Stop what you're doing. Sounds more important. And so I'm glad I hit a terminal degree. I was actually lucky. My MFA program wasn't a snooty one, so I could write my thesis was a fantasy, and I wrote comedy, and I wrote a bunch of different stuff. If you're interested in an MFA, there are going to be the ones who want to stuff you into the Raymond Carver. I'll look him up. You probably who want to stuff you into the Raymond Carver box, but there's plenty out there who will let you be a little bit more free.
This is always where I plug Seton Hill University. Their MFA is specifically in writing popular fiction. I got the degree when it was still an MA long ago, but I got a degree in writing a fantasy novel. And so who can argue with that?
And I can honestly say that my MFA did absolutely nothing for my writing, because I majored in sculpture. I have a master's in unemployability.
I'll say one thing. I went to University of Southern California, went there to learn how to write novels. Richard Rayner, who is my first great mentor, he created Nightfall, the Templar show that's on the History Channel right now. 10 minutes with him, and it was like a 10-year mentorship. He was one of the greatest things that ever happened to me. My writing has improved tremendously. So it was worth it. It was the ridiculous amount of student debt I have was worth it to me.
So we have about 6 minutes, and it looks like we have 5 more questions here. Let's see if we can get through them. Liz wants to know what tools you use for outlining. I think we've answered some of that. Anyone else want to add to that?
Sticky notes, note cards, giant poster board, whatever works for you. It's one of those things, again, there's no wrong way to do it.
Scribner, if that helps.
Yeah, numbers.
Okay, Rebecca wants to know, which do you find easier to edit, outlining or pantsing?
It depends on the type of editing you're doing, whether you're doing a substantive edit or not.
I find them approximately the same level of intensity for editing. It doesn't really seem to make much of a difference to me how the writing got there. It's just I edit the writing as it is. It doesn't really matter what the process was.
Charlie, Ryan, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I mean, maybe this might just be a gut thing. I feel like if you're Discovery, you've got to do more drafts. And then, you know, and but that's, I don't know, that could be bias.
Ryan, did you have anything more to add to that, or not really?
No, not really. I mean, I haven't done a whole lot of editing of pantsing work, but I think everyone else is right. You're gonna have to edit no matter what. So at the end of the day, I'm not sure that it matters how you got there.
I do a lot of beta reading for my friends, and I know some of them are outliners and some of them are pantsers, and I don't think that it necessarily changes how many or the different types of comments that I leave on their work.
Yeah, you're still going to have to edit either way. Although I know I'm having a little more trouble editing the one that I've been working on, and I know it was because it was completely pants from the beginning. For pantsers who want to try plotting, are there particular structures you could recommend trying out? Example, Save the Cat?
I never did Save the Cat.
Hmm?
I never did Save the Cat. I do this. I kind of, you know, like I said, with the screenplays, I was doing this 12-beat system, 10 pages per, and then so now with the you know, switching over to novel writing, I try to get about 36 beats. But yeah, I mean, beginning, middle, end, first act structure, inciting incident. There's a lot of, you know, it wouldn't hurt anybody to read Sid Field's screenplay, because it is a great technique in outlining. I never took his classes, but he did teach in my program, you know, and most books read like movies anyway these days, so you might as well take a look at it, because he really did some great theoretical work.
And our last two questions are kind of the same, so I'm going to combine them. Are there any references? Ryan had mentioned the 7-point structure, and people would like to know what exactly that is, and are there any references you can recommend them learning more about it?
Yeah, we probably don't have enough time right now. I'll be on Discord afterwards, but if you go to writingexcuses.com, they have a great podcast, or if you go to YouTube and search 7-point structure, Dan Wells, he does a good presentation on this. That's where I first learned about it. There's a good Hollywood formula episode with Lou Anders on Writing Excuses, where they break down Casablanca and some of the other Batman Returns, some of the other films with using Hollywood formula, and that'll give you a good idea of what it is.
And we are just about out of time. If we did not get to your question, don't worry, we're going to go hop over to Discord in a moment, and we can continue our conversations. I'd like to go around the room one more time to let us know where we can find you. I also want to add that I hope you've enjoyed virtual Balticon, which is entirely free. If you would like, we would love for you to make a donation. Just hop on over to the Balticon website and help us out, bring more things to you. JL, why don't you do your closing remarks?
Hi, I'm on the internet at jlgribble.com. That's where you can find info about my books and my book review blog. I write the Steel Empire series from Raw Dog Screaming Press. The revised extended bonus features laden edition of Steel Victory is coming out July 15th. But there are 5 in the series so far. So if you're worried about hopping into something new and having it end, you've got plenty of reading ahead of you. Thanks for hanging out at Virtual Balticon with me this weekend.
Charlie?
You can find most of my work at, links to my work at charliebrownwriter.com. You know, having an ungoogleable name is really great. My novels include Vamp City, which is my vampire novel set in Los Angeles. Fate's Stiletto, a straight up sword and sorcery out of the Fritz Lieber mold. Those are on Griffinwood Press. My literary novels include Looking Back on Sodom, which is a look back at the year before Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. And I have a short story collection called The Weird Ones, because that's the kind of guy I am. You can also find my neo-noir Angels Die Slowly, my feature film on the Mubi, M-U-B-I app. So if you have a Roku, you can find it, or you can find it online. That's Angels Die Slowly. So thank you.
And Vivian.
Well, my personal website is vivianshaw.net, and my editorial website is vseditorial.com. The website has links to various places where you can buy the books, but this is Strange Practice, Dreadful Company, and Grave Importance, all out from orbit, and they are about a doctor who is human, but all of her patients are monsters and or various forms of the undead. Also on Twitter as Cerulean Cynic.
Ryan?
Yeah, so my debut novel, The Sin and the Steel, comes out July 21st. It's a story about a young woman named Sambukina Buck-Alhura and her partner in crime solving named Eld. They get blackmailed into solving why ships are disappearing in the far-flung reaches of the world, find themselves facing pirates, the undead, and the gods. Unfortunately for Buck, the gods have other plans for them, and unfortunately for the gods, so does Buck. So it's a lot of fun. Guy Ritchie Sherlock Holmes meets Pirates of the Caribbean. And you can find me at ryanvanloan.com or Twitter and Instagram, my handle at ryanvanloan. And great chatting with everyone. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, great too.
And I am A.L. Kaplan. You can find me at alkaplanauthor.com. It is in the chat right now, along with a link to Amazon where you can find my books. I'm also on Twitter at A.L. Kaplan Author. Thank you very much for coming. And if you have more questions, you can find us in on the Discord channel. Have a super day.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Archer. Great job.